1, 2, test, 1, 2, test. All right.
Recording in progress.
Oh, Alexa, what's the notification?
One new notification from Amazon Shopping. A shipment has arrived. Recording in progress.
Whoa.
Hi,
Hi, Joe. Bill Rick. Nice to meet you.
you too. Sorry I'm late.
Are
Had
you
a
kidding me?
little.
Are you all right? Is everything okay?
I just got to put something in the refrigerator and I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
No, no, no. Thank you very much for sharing your time with me today. This is a real treat for me. I've been looking forward to speaking with you.
Okay, cool.
Uh,
Hear me okay?
so I can hear you great. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, everything's fine.
Excellent. Um, Joe, the kind of set up the conversation under the auspices of the 70th anniversary of Tarantula, a movie that you covered in Trailers from Hell. You had a few things to say about it. What was it like asking your dad to take you to see Tarantula? Did he go to a lot of movies with you back in the day?
Well, my dad was a golf pro, and he spent most of his time getting up really early and coming home really late. So I didn't go to the movies with him that often. But in our local theater, which was the Colony in Lewiston, New Jersey, they would run pictures usually from Wednesday to Saturday and then Sunday through Wednesday. But sometimes they would run pictures only on Wednesday and Thursday, and they'd change the bill on Friday. And unfortunately, Tarantula was only playing on Wednesday and Thursday, which meant that the only way I could see it is if I could get my father to take me to see it on Wednesday or Thursday night, which meant that he would have to come home from his hard day at the golf course and then take me to see a giant spider movie, which is like the last thing that he was interested in seeing. But he was a great dad, and um, he indulged me whenever he could, and he was nice enough to accompany me to the double feature of Tarantula and Running Wild, which is at least a crime picture, so that he got to see something that he could relate to.
Okay.
And more to the more. I was so embarrassed that because I was so scared by the movie, I spent most of my time in the lobby pacing, and he was yeah, he was sitting there watching a giant spider movie by himself.
So was this one of the first horror movies that you saw in theaters?
No, no, no. I'd seen them
Okay.
before that, and them
The year
was
prior.
well, them was scary as hell. I mean, I had nightmares. I imagined that there were the tree branches that were hitting my window pane were actually antennas from giant ants,
Of course.
and the crickets sounded like ants. And so that was a particularly scary movie, especially when the ant came out of the ant hill carrying a human torso, a skeleton of a human torso, and it was like that was pretty heady stuff for an 8-year-old.
No kidding. Heady stuff for a 33-year-old, I can confirm. So these double feature, you'll have to forgive me. Movie going has changed a lot by the time I started going with my parents. These double features were booked differently from the Saturday matinees that would have all the cartoons ahead of them, right?
Well, the double features were pretty much standard unless the movie was really long. And like a Giant didn't have any other feature because it was like a 3-hour movie. But for the most part, all the movies were booked with second features. And uh, the general thought was that on Saturday, when they would run the 10 cartoons, then they'd also want to run a feature. If the feature that was playing was not interesting to kids or not suitable, they would go back into the vault and they would bring back The Wizard of Oz, or they would bring back, a Tarzan movie or Eddie Murphy Western or something like that. And so the movies were pretty much Bowery Boys was very big. Abbott and Costello. They were pictures that kids would like, and generally we would watch the 10 cartoons, and then we would stay for the two features. And it was and your parents got rid of you for the entire weekend, which is
Good
which was
deal.
great. And so it was very popular. It was lots of people dropping their kids off at noon, and then the kids would go to the movies supposed to start at 1 o'clock, and then they wouldn't get home until 5 or 6, and that was gave the parents the whole afternoon off. So it was very popular.
Unless the movie was terrible and then you'd leave after the cartoons, right?
No, no, you'd almost never leave. I mean, I do remember when I was watching the Solid Gold Cadillac, which for some reason they programmed, and I remember thinking it was all in boardrooms. Executive Suite was another movie that was all in boardrooms, and it was like not interesting to a kid. And so I spent most of my time walking the aisles, looking for pennies and dimes and quarters to go to the candy machine and put it in, because otherwise there was nothing to do. Very seldom would we actually leave the theater. That was pretty much, there was always some, you could get into a fight, or you could, there's any number of things you could have done in the theater, but you didn't want to go outside because you paid for it. You paid your quarter. It was a quarter to get in.
Unbelievable. Ah, my, geez, Family of Four's got to remortgage to take them all to
I know, no, it's
the
a
movies
it's a
these days.
different
It's
it's a
terrible.
different world now.
It is a different world, and I think we've lost something of the shared experience of everybody seeing a movie at the same time. Comedies and horror movies, I think, are like so much better when you see them with a group of people.
I agree. They really only work best when there's in a crowd. I mean, they're audience participation movies. And the thing that was sad to me about the demise of the Saturday matinee was that it gave kids a movie going habit, and they really my generation started to become habitual movie goers because they spent so much time at the movies and had such a good time, and they would want to come back. And so today's kids don't have that kind of experience. There's so many other things, competing for their attention, that we only had radio and TV and records and sports. I mean, that was kind of all there was besides movies, and so there weren't that many things to choose from. But now, of course, there's so many other things, and also I've been reading lately that young people tend to be turning away from standard film going, and going more into YouTube and going into curated, homemade videos and things that are much more to their actual experience than watching movies made by adults in some other state. You know.
It's interesting, and my instinct upon reading something like that is to, what do they know? And that, but then you look into it. There's actually a lot of worthwhile uh, stuff, and a lot of filmmakers are getting their start making um, shorts and even features on YouTube, and it's got
Sure, and you could never do that
merit.
before. I mean, you used to have to, when you when I went to film school, everything was on film. You had to get the projector and the camera, and you had to splice it, and you had to mix it, and you had to do all that stuff. And it was a lot of steps, and it was very complicated and somewhat expensive to make a short. Even now, you get a bunch of friends together, and you can make a short, and you can put it on the internet, and people can see it. It's the opportunities are really great. The problem is that you have to find something for it to be about. And the one thing you
It's
don't
true.
want to do is you don't want to do copies of other people's things. You want to do your own. And I think that's the appeal for younger audiences, is give me something that relates to me. Even when I was going to the movies, the juvenile delinquent movies and pictures from AIP were all movies that you wanted to see them because your parents didn't want you to see them. But now that's all changed because the parents have very little to do with anymore with what kids watch on their phone or watch on their computers. And so it's a brave new world, and nobody knows where to find
They got to have an internet haze code to
it.
to restrict what these kids can see. No more flushing toilets on YouTube. I my nephew's got virtual reality stuff going. I don't even know what he's doing in there, and it's unbelievable the things that he learns from it that you might not want him to. Uh, we were when you and I were emailing back and forth, we were talking about how willing were your parents to let you go to a horror movie? Were they like, no, it's going to give you nightmares. There's no way we're gonna.
Well, they did. They would say when I, particularly when I saw them, and I had nightmares. They would say, "Well, if these movies make you nightmares. Why do you go?" And I said, "Because I need to see them. I relate to them. They do something for me. They're not things like in real life. They're not things part of my real life. They're fantasies. And I was very heavily into fantasies. I was a big Disney kid, and anything that was out of the ordinary was interesting to me. And so they were very supportive because I wanted to be a cartoonist, and they didn't pretend to understand me, but they supported me. And then I got polio, so I missed school for like a year, and
1954.
1954, and right before the Salk vaccine, unfortunately, and I didn't get it. So of course I never learned multiplication tables, which makes it difficult even for me to make change these days. But it was I did a lot of thinking and a lot of drawing and a lot of reading Classics Illustrated comics because it was the only comics they had in the hospital was Classics Illustrated. And luckily they were unaware of how many of them wouldn't pass the comic code today because they were all drawn in the 40s. And but it was I managed to make the best of it, but it was I could only compare it to people's experience with COVID maybe these days because COVID has been a lot more influential than people think. It's really changed the landscape quite a bit, and all the roiling tensions and arguments that came out of it, and whether we're going to mask or we're not going to mask, or we're going to tell us what to do or let us do what we want. That's actually snowballed into the politics we have today,
Unfortunately,
unfortunately.
I I was just thinking of how prophetic some of your projects had been. I watched the Screwfly solution. And damn near a documentary. Uh, Unfortunately, these days it's I guess apocryphal would be the word. That did you?
Well, hopefully that hasn't actually happened, but the things that are depicted in that movie, guys jeering at women and the incel theory thing, which you can see on this new Netflix show called Adolescence, which is phenomenal. But there's a lot of stuff in this group evolution about men and women and the way they relate to each other that is still pretty pertinent.
Misogyny is rampant. Uh,
Misogyny is
and
yes, misogyny is us.
and I wonder how much more positive creativity would have come out during COVID if the internet had been knocked out at the same time and we weren't all too busy yelling at each other online. Maybe we could have come up with some good story. Not to say that there were no good art came out of it. You know, there we're still I think in a wave of stuff people were writing during COVID, but like I just sit and think like if we weren't all so tied up in the politics that he's wrong, they're wrong could have been a much more productive maybe time period than it had been.
Well, the internet has certainly changed things, probably for the better in some ways, but in a lot of ways, it's much worse than it was before. We're much more divided, and there's much more rancor, and people there's more hate, frankly, and a lot of it emanates from the people that we elect, or at least the people we elected last time.
Oh yeah, uh, that absolutely it becomes clearer every day the purposeful division that they're stoking. Um, And the
Well, it
internet,
works. It works.
yeah.
That's the key to their success is that if you pit people against each other and hit them with as is currently being done, hit them with so many repellent things that they don't even have time to respond before you send them another repellent thing. And then they get all confused because and then they start infighting about details, which is not the way to do it. Yeah, there's a rampant change going on in this country, and it's not for the good. And I think there's a lot of people who didn't know what they were voting for and now have discovered that maybe they're not going to have a farm that they thought they were going to have. They're not going to have some other things that they thought they were going to have because the people they voted for actually don't want them to have them because they don't care about them. All they care about is rich people who don't have enough money apparently and need more, and they need your money out of your pocket.
I can't imagine thinking, but they got my best interest in all these billionaires. I have to support them and their right to take and take and take from me. I just
Yeah,
it's sad that so many
you're getting far afield
folks are
from
so
tarantula.
misled.
You're getting far afield from tarantula.
We are. I was going to tie it back in. I was going to say the second Civil War might not just be on HBO, and then we pull it back into what really needs to happen. People need to come back into the workplace or school and go, you know what picture I saw over the weekend? Tarantula. Did you feel part of a rank of kid? Was there a whole bunch of kids going to see these movies that you'd go in and
Yeah, I went with my friends, and we would talk about the movies, but that wasn't as pervasive later as TV was. I mean, when the Twilight Zone and Thriller and Outer Limits and all that kind of stuff came on, I mean, those were things people actually talked about at school. It was like, did you see that? And even when they ran the Universal Horror Pictures, I mean, Shock Theater, those were all things that none of us had ever seen because they weren't in our purview. They were from long before us. And there was lots of talk about those kind of things and lots of school bus chatter and all those kind of things. And that later, when I went to college, then it was sort of water cooler chatter. And it was, you go to the movies and then you order a pizza and talk about what you just saw. And that was the era of movies from Europe and all sorts of interesting stuff that was going on even in Hollywood in the 60s that was the era of the film magazine and people taking movies seriously and writing about them, and there were places to read about them and stuff like that. And now all of that has moved to the internet. There are no film magazines. There's like maybe a few, but for the most part, they've disappeared. And the things that used to be written in film magazines are now basically put up online. But there's so much material online that it's not like going to the magazine stand and picking the magazine you want. It's like there's just so much stuff that unless it's curated by somebody, you're going to miss most of it. The things that you might, which is why I started Trailers from Hell, was just to get younger people interested in movies that they might not even know existed if it wasn't for the fact that somebody else who's made a movie that they might recognize says, movie influenced me and I think it's really interesting and you should see it. And it's been very rewarding having people come up and say, I never knew about that actor. I never knew about that director until I saw it on Trailers from Hell. So that's been a worthwhile endeavor.
well, I appreciate your efforts because you're right. I don't have Cahiers du cinema or whatever the French were writing. I think Truffaut wrote for him or something.
Yeah.
Anyhow, did you have a horror host on TV growing up?
No, we had horror hosts. I wasn't one. We
No,
had
I'm sorry.
Zachary.
I was asking
We,
if you
we had
had
we
one.
had we had Zach Early was the guy from he was from Philadelphia originally. He was Roland and wrote to New York and he became Zachary and he was the main guy. But then when I came out to California in the 70s, there was Elvira and there is still Svengoolie and there was another guy named Seymour. And I think there's a whole horror host. Yeah, right. There's a whole horror host subculture of people who have been running these movies on TV for years. And that all precedes the Mystery Science Theater stuff where they just rag on them. I mean, they would make fun of the movies sometimes, but they didn't rag on them the way that they did on Mystery Science Theater, which presupposes that every movie is terrible that they run, which is completely not true. A lot of the movies they run are pretty interesting.
No, I appreciate parody the most when it has a clear love for the subject matter, and not to disparage Mystery Science 3000 Theater 3000 in any way, but I've always connected more when something's poking fun at a piece of media that like you can tell that you know they love it. Weird Al is my favorite example of like
Yeah.
he's clearly got affection for a lot of these songs, or he wouldn't be you know listening to them long enough to
Well, yeah,
come
exactly.
up with the second set
If
of
you don't
lyrics.
have the affection, you can't spend the time, immersing yourself in the stuff. You can't just do it out of pure rancor. You have to do it because you really relate to it in some way. And all the best satire is that way. Mad Magazine is that way. I mean, everything was done based on people's understanding of what it was they were satirizing.
Joe, you brushed up against National Lampoon briefly. It didn't happen with Jaws 3 People Zero, but they were a little I'm trying, you know, this is professional journalism. I'm trying to steer conversation toward your career and its development. Uh, Tarantula. One of the things I love about Tarantula, it's a little subversive for that group of giant monster movies. It's not nuclear. It's not even an evil scientist. The guy's a good scientist. He's trying his best to um, you know solve world hunger, just like I'm trying my best to be a good journalist here. And it's subverted my expectations, and that's my one of my favorite parts about a lot of your movies, the way that you subvert a lot of expectation. You set up a slasher movie, boom, it's a werewolf picture. Um, you know, I'm not going to be the 3 millionth person to sit here and oh, you and John Lennon werewolf picture at the same time. I think that pretty much every interview that I've listened to doing research mentioned that. So I'm not doing that right now. Uh, and how much of that where did that I don't know if anarchic is the right word. But where did that come from growing up? Like that
So subversive is the word.
yeah, subversiveness. Where did that come from?
A lot of that came from Mad Magazine. I mean, I was a real Mad Magazine kid, and all the things that they made fun of in Mad Magazine were all things that our parents took very seriously. Uh, and um, and there are always little gags in the corners. There were, if you read it again a couple of times, there would be something in the background you hadn't seen before. I've always tried to do that in my movies because I have to watch them over and over. So I always try to put little bits and pieces of things in there for myself. Um, but for in Tarantula, it's based on a science fiction theater episode called "No Food for Thought," which is about the creation of artificial food, which is exactly the which basic plot of Tarantula is he's trying to grow all this big stuff. He's trying to grow big, and even beginning of the end, I think they're trying to grow giant vegetables. I mean, they're always trying to grow something big, and then the wrong things get big. Is what happens in science fiction movies.
And that is kind of a thread in a lot of your movies. The powers that be haven't a clue what
Well, there's a certain strain of anti-authoritarianism in my movies, no doubt about
there is. And uh, I came out of sat down and watched Matinee, and I fell for like the rah rah, let's get him with the helicopter at the end, only to then read that that's you chose that particular helicopter because it was the kind
it.
that a lot
It's
of
a
those boys.
Sikorsky. That's a Sikorsky. That's the one. Those are the ones they used in Vietnam, and that's where half the cast of that movie is going to end up.
That broke my heart. Uh, you know, not that I usually don't go for the jingoistic patriotism, so I'm glad that that wasn't the ultimate message. But like, yeah, that was that's sad. It's
Yeah,
sad.
well,
It's bleak.
that's what happened. I mean, American Graffiti ends the same way.
Yeah.
They've got
Eh,
those little cards that tells you so and so became an insurance salesman, so and so got killed in Vietnam, so and so. That was the first time I think I'd ever seen that done.
I a- as if to say like, oh, you thought the nuclear threat was bad. You ain't seen nothing yet, bub.
Well, I mean, Lawrence Wolsey is telling his girlfriend that everything's going to be fine, the kids are going to be all right, and then you think it's a happy ending, and then there's this harbinger of the future, which is that this rather ominous looking helicopter. I don't think it looks jingoistic. I think it looks scary.
I agree. I Lawrence Woolsey, did when you were going to Will, William Castle Pictures at your theater, did they do all the
Well,
gimmicks?
no, very few of those gimmicks were actually done in theaters. I mean, the gimmick in the Tingler, which is the seat buzzers, was a very complicated thing to do, and I think they outside of major cities they really didn't do it, and that's why they didn't wire every seat was because it was very expensive. These leftover World War II motors or something that they stuck under the seats, but as you see in matinee, you could be electrocuted if you do it wrong. So I think a lot of and there's a huge manual that came with the movie that explains how to install the Percepto seat buzzers, and it's we read it before we started the movie. It's like, holy bro, how many people actually could have done this? Because if it wasn't a big chain of theaters, then I just can't see mom and pop theaters in Minnesota, and taking out the screwdrivers and going under the seats to make this work. And the same thing with the skeleton in House on Haunted Hill. I don't half the time it didn't work. It was supposed to come out off one edge of the theater and then it would come down but then even when it did work, kids would throw candy boxes at it and stuff. I mean, it
Ugh.
was it was a great gimmick that was kind of silly, but this one was actually a great gimmick because they didn't wire every seat and because people whose seats weren't wired were looking over at people who were screaming and moving and like, oh my God. And then they would go, well, what's wrong with them? And then it would become pandemonium because all the lights are out, which is something you could never do today. We wouldn't let you turn all the lights out.
You're right. Yeah, I've never experienced it. There's always been along the aisle and the big exit signs. I've
Yeah,
never
no, you
been
can't
in
turn those out
pitch black.
anymore. But there have been many revival screenings of The Tingler where, well, in fact, I was in one at the Turner Classic Movies cruise that I was on last year, and
Whoa.
what basically they set up the seat buzzers and they bring in nurses and they bring in shills to scream and they'll bring in a stretcher and somebody will faint and they'll take them out of the stretcher. It goes back to the original Frankenstein. That's the same gimmicks that they used with the stretcher and the people screaming and stuff. That was a ballyhoo trick that they used to use. And William Castle just glommed onto it, and he was a competent filmmaker, but he was a great showman. And so that was his whole interest was in just, making the audience have an experience they wouldn't be able to have anywhere else.
That's effective. I
Yeah.
saw it at the music box. The guy behind me tickled me. I don't think he worked for them. I think that this was just some local creep. They I was expecting to get shocked and it just didn't. It never happened. It was a shame. That and a straight jacket, I think was a William Castle
Yeah.
picture that they showed here at the music box, and it was kept waiting for something to come out and get me, and it never did. It was a shame.
I don't think there's a gimmick in them.
They come out and behead the front row.
I don't I can't remember what the gimmick was in that. There were some other ones that didn't have gimmicks too. I mean, after a while, it was like, it's the
Enough's
law of
enough, William
the
Castle.
law of diminishing returns.
Yeah. There was a my version of that growing up. There was a like a show in Disney World called "It's Tough to Be a Bug," and it was the picture Bug's Life, the Pixar movie. They load you into a theater and it's like little air pistons that made you feel like there was all bugs going past
Yeah,
your legs and
I,
stuff like
I, I
that.
did I did one of those for SeaWorld called the R.L. Stein's Haunted Lighthouse. It was a 3D movie where they had interactive
Ooh.
stuff where they squirted water at you and they made you think bugs were crawling up you and stuff like that. And it was a lot of fun to do.
Oh, that's awesome. Speaking of R.L. Stein, he was also here in Chicago at the Music Box Theater, which was great because he was super influential to me. I wanted to ask, you were a monster kid. Did you ever get the chance to meet Forey Ackerman?
Oh yeah, yeah, but not until I came out to California. Because Fari did he was the editor of Famous Monsters, and he was had a good relationship with the audience who he was told your audience is 11 years old, write to them, and which is what he did. And even though he had much higher aspirations for the magazine when it was first proposed, but then he went, okay, I'll play to the kids, and he became this sort of father figure character. And then when he came out here, he had this big collection of stuff, and he would let people come in. And he would have Saturdays, he would bring people over, and they would could look at all of his props and his stills and stuff, and they would steal stuff from him blindly because he was so trusting. I mean, half the stuff just would go out on people under people's coats. I mean, he just
Uh,
was one of those guys who just was never destined, and he kept trying to sell the stuff to the LA the LA government, and they kept saying, "Well, we'll build a museum for you," and they never did. And so now all that material is all scattered to the winds. But he was very influential. He had a lot of filmmakers were on his list of people to come and hold court in his living room.
and you wrote two, and then they published it
Yeah, they
in
published one of my
Famous
letters.
Monster Truck.
Yeah, 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 that was
Called it
my first.
Dante's Inferno.
Yeah, that was. I was very excited when he sent me that magazine.
Here I was thinking I'd have a clever title for the transcription of this interview, and it's
Don't
been
use Dante's
taken
Inferno.
decades ago. First thought, darn it. Uh, another thing you were in arena back then, the Scrooge McDuck comics.
Yeah, Uncle Scrooge.
Were they just like a little bit more sophisticated
No,
than
no,
other comics at the time?
there was one Disney artist named Carl Barks who was known as the good artist, the good duck artist. And he took the Donald Duck character, who is very one note in the cartoons, and in the comic books, he turned him into an actual everyman character. And because Barks was interested in the past and in legends and stuff like that, he would always put him in situations where he would be going into the center of the earth to find something or whatever with his two nephews, and Uncle Scrooge would be along to finance it. And there was something special about the material that Barks did. And Steven Spielberg is a huge fan. He has some giant Carl Barks paintings in his office because Barks, like Ray Harryhausen, was a lucky enough guy to stay alive long enough to realize he had been venerated. You know,
Oh wow.
a lot of these guys pass away. Lugosi and Willis O'Brien, people like that, die before they realize how famous they are. But Barks and Harryhausen managed to spend their later years raking in the accolades from people who said, "You made my childhood, and I love you, and I love what the stuff you've done," and that must be very rewarding for somebody who spent their time thinking that the work that they're doing wasn't really getting much attention.
Do you feel like you get your flowers these days, Joe?
Oh, I've gotten overly flowered.
Good. Who's Rover Cat and Duffy Dog?
They were characters that I made up for cartoon comic books that I used to draw when I was a kid. I had my own characters, my own cast of characters that I would put in these stories.
Were
Most of
these
which I
also
would.
everymen like Donald Duck?
They were less sophisticated, I think, but they were definitely influenced by what I was reading in the comics and what I was seeing in the movies. I still have some. I think I gave some of those things to the Academy. I've still got some of them around somewhere. But um, when I wanted to be a cartoonist, until I went to art school and they told me I couldn't be a cartoonist because it wasn't an art and I should take their film class instead. So I took the 40 students, two camera, 16 millimeter class. And I didn't didn't do very well, but I did live in Philadelphia where there were lots of grindhouses, and I spent lots of time going to the movies with all the money I was supposed to spend on art supplies. I was spending on movie tickets, which were very cheap because let's face it, grindhouses are pretty cheap, and the audiences are a little rowdy, but and often
Sure.
dangerous. But still, there was a lot of pictures you would never be able to see otherwise.
These were on Market Street.
Market Street, there was the Family Theater, the News Theater, and the Palace. Palace was the classy one. That was actually a regular theater. But the News Theater was a newsreel theater that was built in World War II, and it had a square screen at the end of the long hall. So any
Oh, neat.
widescreen movies they ran were produced in Cinemascope because they would you just end up on the wall. And the other theater was the Family Theater, the ill-named Family Theater, which was always triple bills. And often the heat was turned up to record-breaking levels, especially when I saw the day the Earth caught fire. They turned the heat up so much. It was incredible. But you couldn't go to the bathroom there because you might not come back. Because
Ooh.
it was a known hangout for creeps and rowdies and people who like to put their hands down little boys' pants and stuff. And so you just had to hold it. So a triple feature, you really probably only make it through two of them. But what I saw a knifing there. There was a murder in the theater. They never turned the movie off. They never turned the lights on, even when the police came to grab the guy who did the stabbing. They never turned it on, which I
Oh
kind of
wow.
admired. I kind of admired that because I'd come to see
Huh.
some Mario Bava movie that I would never get to see anywhere else, and I didn't want it turned off. You just had to keep moving your seat. Whenever you ended up next to a creep, you'd have to just keep moving.
What better gimmick? I mean, that Castle could never a
No,
genuine
no,
stabbing in a
he'd be
Mario Bava
jailed for
movie.
that.
I Market Street obviously has changed a lot, but there was a movie theater further up Broad Street when I went to Temple, and there was a shooting, and they turned off the I think it was Quantum of Solace, the James Bond movie. I was
Oh,
watching. They did evacuate.
well,
It was a
they'd
shame.
learned their lesson from all the stories about what happened in the 70s and 60s.
I'm sure they did. I and you were saying film school wouldn't let you animation. What do they know? That school just shut down anyway a couple years ago,
I
I
know
think.
it did. It did. It was called the Philadelphia College of Art when I went there. Then it was called the University of the Arts, and there was some sort of malfeasance in the funding of it or something. And there was, I mean, because I spent a lot of time there, and even when I was living in Philadelphia after I graduated, I would hang around there because I knew so many people, the teachers and stuff. And there was a big stone stairway that everybody would sit out on,
Yeah,
which for all I know may still be there. It's on Broad and Pine.
yeah. Last time I checked.
I don't know what they're doing with that building. I mean, it's a pretty big building, and actually, it's in other buildings too.
Yeah, I don't know if they'll tear it down. The good news is now just about anybody can say they went there. It's really hard to verify whether you actually got your
I would
diploma
think,
or not.
yeah.
Yeah. I we uh lost David Lynch. He was spent a lot of time in Philly, and you could kind of see it in a lot of his movies. Do you think Philadelphia influenced your filmmaking career outside of like what you learned in school?
Um, well, I mean, it was a pretty unique place. It was not like New Jersey. It was not like New York. It was, it had some of those elements, but it was Philadelphia. Plus, it had this long history of 1776 and all that. I mean, all that stuff was still there, the Liberty Bell and all that kind of stuff. And Betsy Ross's house, where you go in and you realize that the average person was 5'2" when they built those things.
Sure.
We took our Wheaties after that, and now nobody can fit through the doors. Um, I enjoyed Philadelphia. And I've been through some pretty hairy, uh, about to have riots situations in Philadelphia.
Sure.
But I was there. I was there from off and on from 64 to 73, and then when I came out here, I basically was out here.
And then you were cutting up trailers. I was gonna say if I were to like stitch together 7 hours trailer foot, a lot less impressive now. I don't think anybody would it wouldn't even be an entry on my w eventual Wikipedia page, I don't think.
Well, I did end up making movies trailers for Roger Corman, but before that, I my friend John Davis and I did a picture called The Movie Orgy, which was a 7 hour compilation film, which we used to take around to college campuses, and the Schlitz people found out about it and offered to give us money, and there was only one print because it was all spliced together, and it's now amazingly actually in distribution from American Genre Film Archive because they said, well,
Oh wow.
can we make a DVD of it or a Blu-ray or something, DCP of it? And so we did, and it's not the 7 hour version; it's only a 5 hour version, so it's not quite as much fun as the 7 hour version because the whole idea of the 7 hour version was that you could go out and have dinner, come back, and you hadn't missed anything. Um, and it basically was we created it because they re-released the Batman serial from 1943 to capitalize on the TV show, and they released all 15 chapters that you would sit and watch all at once, and it was hilarious, and it was dated, and it was racist, and they cheated wildly at the ends of the things. They would show Batman getting crushed by a rock, and then the beginning of the next episode, he would jump away, and the rock wouldn't crush him. And you go, wait a minute, and you figure, well, I guess the kids would figure after a week had gone by, they wouldn't remember how the other one ended, so you could cheat. Um, anyway, it was an experience to see with an audience and spend that much time, and so we said, well, we could do that with other weird stuff. We got together some other serials and pieces of movies and TV shows and cut them all together. And a lot of them were TV shows that people had seen when they were kids and hadn't even remembered they knew what they were. And it's the way they were cut together was very funny, and it was hilarious, very popular. If you go on IMDb, there's a whole lot of testimonials of people who saw this thing when it was new, and then it just disappeared. It was kind of like a lost film until I found a bunch of reels. And these guys said, "Well, let's see if we can put it out." So it's out for whatever that's worth.
And how did Schlitz work in it? What did they have, a guy with a cooler follow you around when you
The idea was that we took it
showed
around,
him?
we took it around ourselves, and originally, and we just would keep the money. And Schlitz came when we ran it at Columbia University, and the guy came up to us and said, if you guys will take this to college campuses and let us put a Schlitz logo on the front of it, we'll give you some money and we'll sell beer to the kids. And of course,
Wow.
everybody was smoking dope. So that what does that makes them thirsty? And so it was very popular. Lots of beer was sold. Schlitz was very happy. And then as the years went on, the problem was that Schlitz kept saying, "Well, why can't you put some new stuff in? Can't you put like the Flintstones in?" And I said, "No, you can't put the Flintstones in there because the Flintstones knows it's a parody. And the only things that are funny in this thing are things that were done straight, like Airplane. When you see Airplane, that's based on a very serious original movie called Zero Hour. And what they did is they just exaggerated everything that was in the original movie. But the original movie has a plot and a rising action and characters and stuff. And so they're building on a foundation that makes sense. And so that's why there's so many rooms for great jokes in that movie. And the same thing with the movie Archie. It really only worked when you were watching things that were meant to be serious, but now seemed silly.
And if Leslie Nielsen's playing it silly, it doesn't work.
No, well, apparently, originally, when they started shooting, the actors that they had hired, who were all famous for being in straight dramas, uh, thought they should camp it up. And they had to say, no, 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 no. That's not how it works. You can't be funny. You have to be completely serious or it won't be funny. And they picked it up, and Leslie Nielsen turned it into a career. I mean, who knows? He would have just been another faded leading man if he had not had this resurgence as a comedian. which was as big a surprise to him as it was to anybody else. And I directed the 2 episodes of Police Squad, so I
Oh,
know what
that's
I
right.
talk about.
I was trying. I was like, oh, I know I read Zucker Abrams and Zucker somewhere near your name. That was it. Police Squad. Uh, when you directed TV, were there lessons that you took from working with Roger Corman that served you better in TV than they did in movies?
Well, they served me better whatever I was doing. I mean, basically you learn to solve problems and you learn to be decisive, and just make a decision. And if it's the wrong decision, you can deal with it later. But you can't dither. You can't say, well, maybe we could do it this way, or maybe we could do it that way. That's what the Democrats do. That's why they never get elected. The Republicans come out and say, this is what we're doing, and even it's shitty, but we're going to do it. And people say, yeah, we like that. And so you have to act like you know what you're doing, and that gives you time to actually think while you're doing whatever you're creating, whatever it is that you're creating. And so TV goes just about at the same pace as a Corman movie, but in the old days, TVs were small and you couldn't do set gags that well because everybody knew that the TV screen was small. That's why I never made any movies in CinemaScope, because I knew that all my movies are going to be basically seen on TV and they're going to be pan and scanned, which I hate. So I didn't start making movies in CinemaScope until the TVs got wider. And then I realized now you can see things that, in the correct ratio. I was a big campaigner for putting movies out in their original ratio, which the DGA was promulgating for quite a long time, and now it's. I'm happy to say that most movies that we see today are actually shown pretty much the way they were supposed to be seen.
Which is better for background gags.
Absolutely.
I read Roger Corman's book, and it was neat to like learn how your path crossed with his. And then so part of this conversation, I've been kind of dreading bringing up what I know is a project that it's very contentious for you. When I was a kid, we didn't have a ton of DVDs, and one of our favorite movies, me and my brother, was Looney Tunes Back in Action. Watching it now as an adult, it was just so cool to see, like, holy crap, there's Roger Corman, there's Peter Graves, you got Robbie the Robot in there, the Roman, and Fiend Without a Face. I know it'll never be worth the year and a half of your life that it kind of uh, stomped on, but that movie was so meaningful to me as a kid and held up in unexpected ways when I watched it again recently as an adult. I just wanted to take a moment to tell you how that movie in particular was so appreciated in my household. And again, I understand that like it was kind of an awful experience to make
Well,
it.
but it was all
Um,
worth it if people take that away from it, then it was worth going through dealing with people who don't like cartoons, telling you how to make cartoons, that kind of thing. But it was a very unpleasant experience, but it had its rewards, and there were a lot of things about it that I enjoyed. And I just didn't enjoy the fact that there were people who were so fucking stupid, telling me how to make a movie that they would never walk across the street to see.
Kind of a recurring theme in some of the work your name's attached to, Joe, is
It's a recurring theme.
s-
Talk to any filmmaker. They'll tell you it's a recurring theme in their life. If you watch the new TV series that started yesterday called what's it called? Um,
the studio.
The Studio. Um, the whole premise of the show is that there's the studio executive who says that he loves his films, but is under pressure to make money, and completely sells out everything that he believes in order to make that happen. and it's a painfully funny, accurate movie, a TV show. And I only seen the first two episodes, but it's people say, was that what it's really like? Yes, that's what it's like. It's not exaggerated. That's what it's like.
I gotta check it out.
You'll like
It's
it. It's
good
on
to
Apple.
know that people are holding the studio's feet to the fire. Finally.
Well,
Uh,
let me just say there are many things in it that people who do this for a living will recognize.
Good. I also, before we move too far away from it, do want to say that I think when I was a kid, everybody's into Space Jam. I think the grown-up Looney Tunes back in action holds up a lot better because it's so much truer to those characters in Space Jam. They're unrecognizable. You don't, they didn't Bugs Bunny didn't really act like Bugs Bunny, and it is nice to see and understand the affection again for those characters in your picture.
Your mic is breaking up.
Oh,
Click it or something. Now say something.
is it better now?
That's better. No,
Okay.
it was burbling and stuff. It's because Space Jam is a deal. And, Looney Tunes Back in Action is a movie. There's a difference.
Ooh. Yeah, yeah, I can understand that. And that's why they were did you have Jeff Gordon in your movie because they wanted to do Race Jam?
They did. They had another version of the picture of the script originally because there were a lot of versions before I got there. There was another version of the script where the race was like the plot of the movie. It was a race car movie because there was a version with Jackie Chan. There was a whole lot of different ideas for what this movie should be, and because I was friendly with Chuck Jones and I knew what he thought of Space Jam, even though I didn't think the script was very good, I thought I should take the job just to make sure that the characters didn't end up doing hip hop and going out of character, or whatever was the current fashion, and try to keep them true to what I remember them being. And so it was kind of I wouldn't say it was a sacred trust, but it was something that I felt that I should do. And so that's one of the reasons I was able to put up with it.
Are you following this Coyote versus Acme stuff that's going on?
Yeah, I think that it's a possibility it's going to come out because Ketchup Pictures, who released the new Day the Earth Blew Up, which is quite good, I think is in negotiations to buy Coyote versus Acme from its makers, the imbeciles at Warner Brothers who would rather shelve a movie than make it. And so I think it's possible that I don't think you're ever going to see Batgirl because I think that's
Oh, they
gone
robbed me
forever.
of it.
I think that's gone forever, but along with the residuals and all the money that people would have made who worked on it. But I think there's a possibility that Coyote versus Acme might see the light of day.
Residuals. That's the part that's missing from all the pieces in Variety and stuff like that I had read about. Yeah, because I'm trying to wrap my head around why that it's the residuals. That's why
It's
they
partly
don't
the
want to release
residuals.
this.
It's partly if they take a tax shelter, then they save a huge amount of money. I mean, when they to spend $90 million on Batgirl and then decide to shelve it means that it's a write-off that they can take, and so it's got nothing to do with the quality of the movie, as far as I know. It's just that this is the sacrificial lamb that they needed to do right now. But I think that company is being incredibly poorly run. Um, Although I'm sure the people who run it would disagree. But I know that the guy who runs the company runs around saying how much he loves movies, but movie lovers don't do that.
Yeah, no, they let you see the Batgirl. You'd kind of brushed up against Batman in your career. You almost
Yeah, I
I don't know
almost did
if
a
you know
bat.
this. You're a un uh, or there's a whole list on your Wikipedia page that like, and I understand half of them are probably not as nearly unrealized as a lot of the other ones. But what would you have done with the Batman character that maybe hadn't we haven't seen?
Well, the reason I didn't do the Batman movie was because I didn't believe in Batman. It was a great opportunity. Everybody was telling me how wonderful it was that I was going to do this, and the script wasn't bad. It was by Tom Mankiewicz, who had written on some James Bond movies. But I didn't do the movie for one simple reason. I didn't believe in Batman. I realized the only reason I wanted to do the movie was to have John Lithgow play the Joker. And I thought, this is wrong. I'm not the guy to do this movie. The guy who does this movie should be, should believe in Batman. And I don't. I just don't buy it. And, and then it was the same reason I didn't do the Flintstones movie. Because I said, you guys, I don't like the Flintstones. The Flintstones is a ripoff of the Honeymooners. Why don't you get a guy who's got Flintstone soap in his bathroom? That's the kind of guy you need to do this movie. And apparently that's what they did. And they were all very happy and they made a movie that made money, and which is great. But if I'd made it, it wouldn't have been a good movie and it wouldn't have made any money. So, you got to choose your project.
Was there any project that you were like, ah, damn, I wish that could have
Yeah, sure. I
come to
had
fruition?
Termite Terrace, which was about Chuck Jones at Warner Brothers, but that didn't get made. Space Jam got made instead. And then the movie by Roger making the trip called The Man with Kaleidoscope Eyes. I tried to get made for over 10 years, and then that kind of just didn't happen. And now Roger's not happening. So that's another one that got away. But there's as you say with in this, I haven't seen this Wikipedia page, but I'm sure it will remind me of various things that I don't remember working on that I was apparently going to do. Because it does, once you invest in something and then you're not going to do it, you kind of put it out of your mind. Unless it's something you really want to hold back and make sure that you can do it at some later date. But if it's just something that falls apart, you just go, okay, next. And there's a guy writing a book about me now. He's constantly reminding me about these projects that I keep having to go to my producer friend Mike Fennell and say, "Do you remember this? Tell me about it. Remind me what this was."
It's a shame that you couldn't have you and Warner Brothers meet in the middle, have Michael Jordan play Chuck Jones. I don't see any reason why that wouldn't have been a, a spectacular box office performance.
A CGI version of my of,
Maybe. Uh, Joe, Charlie Haas, what is it about him as a writer that you love that made you keep wanting to work with him? Was it just your good friends, or was it
Well, we are friends, and he's a very good writer. And I've read his books, and I first met him through Jonathan Kaplan because he was writing on Over the Edge, which was one of Jonathan's better pictures. Introduced Matt Dillon, um, and Charlie and we always hit it off, and he's written so much stuff for me that never got made. My drawer is like filled with all these drafts of Charlie Haas things that didn't happen. But he's one of the best writers I know. And when you want to write something, you want to go to the best writers you know. And John Sayles is another one. They're people they'll deliver. They know you, you know them, and um, they come up with ideas that you wouldn't think of, and they embellish the ideas that you have. And it's a match made in heaven because if you don't have a script, you don't have a movie.
this is true? Do you think that's what's missing the mark with a lot of movies these days? Is it, they're
No, movies these days are just too long. That's what's missing the mark in these movies. They're all too fucking long. Who is going to sit through almost 4 hours of a word list? And what do you get for your 4 hours? An
two
intermission.
trips to the bathroom. That's what I get.
That's why they have an intermission.
Eh.
No, everything, even the movies I liked, which is the substance I liked, was too long. I mean, there's just, I don't know whatever happened to the art of editing. It's just like you can't just keep making the same point over and over. You got to stop at some point and say, there's something to be said for brevity. Half the movies that I love the most are like 75 minutes or less. I mean, that's back in the 30s. They were making movies that were like just they moved, they were rat-a-tat, they happened, and now everything is so languorous and the shots linger so long. And I love there's long movies I love. I love Lawrence of Arabia. I love Once Upon a Time in the West. I love The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I love movies that are long, but there needs to be a reason for them to be. They can't just be long because, well, it's a movie and if it doesn't run for 2.5 hours, the exhibitors will complain. Well, I got news for you. The exhibitors complain when they run 2.5 hours because they have to try to fit in an extra show and they can't because it's too long. Anyway, that's my
Yeah,
2 cents.
I almost wonder if it's for the eventuality of it keeping people watching the streaming service longer, like keeping that on longer or something, like because
I
it's
don't know. I don't know if they think
ridiculous.
about that because the streaming services, all they care about is you going to the next thing. You ever try to watch credits at the end of a show on a streaming service?
Oh, you can't.
I mean, you can't. I mean, if you click your clicker a couple of times and you can figure out the magic formula, you can actually get the credits to play. But for the most part, they just go immediately to the next thing because they don't want you to go away. They don't want you to think about what you're going to do. If you're going to watch something, watch the next thing. And it's kind of embarrassing because the people who work on these things, nobody ever gets to see who they are. The actors don't get to be identified. The crew members don't get to be identified. It's a scandal, I think. I just I've written about it. I've written to the companies. I've talked to people, but it never changes. It's an algorithm, and they just have to get off. As soon as the show's over, they have to get off and they have to go on to the next show. They even do it in shows where they're rerunning, movies or TV shows from the 50s and 60s where they'll just put it in a little box. The credit as the last scene runs, a little box appears, which was too small to read, and because contractually you have to run those credits, they run and then they go away and you still can't see it, and it's like, well, make the box bigger, but they don't want to make the box bigger because chances are they want to put an advertisement there. So it's getting credit in Hollywood. It's a good thing they have IMDb. As
Yeah,
often
no
as
kidding.
as often as that's wrong, but at least you can go someplace and look up stuff if you need to. But most people don't want to do that.
Not to get too conspiratorial, but they're training generations of people to de-emphasize the importance of the people that make these movies in favor of us Amazon doing it.
Soon it won't be people. It'll be AI.
Ugh.
You've heard of
Uh,
short attention span theater. I mean, it's
oh my
everybody
God.
is like, it's going far, hurry up, faster, faster.
I have to practice to train my brain to deprogram all the yeah, I constantly feel my attention span getting
Shrinking.
shorter
Yeah.
and shorter. It's a shame. I can't imagine if being younger and not knowing time before the internet, before TikTok and that kind of thing. Brutal. Uh,
It's a
I wanted
different
to ask
world
you.
now.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. You're not kidding. I wanted to ask you about trailers. As somebody that used to cut trailers professionally, uh, did they have to tell me the whole story?
No, we,
And
we,
that
we, did, we didn't used to do that. They used to do things called teasers where, you would just tease the audience of what it's going to be. And don't show them the monster. Don't show, just let them give them a hint, but don't. Now, the trailer's over. You've seen the whole movie. You know how it ends. One thing I learned when I started cutting trailers for my own movies was that you shouldn't do a trailer for your own movie because you're so jealous of some of the things in the movie that you don't want to give away that you don't want to put them in the trailer. And somebody else just says, "Well, this is a great shot. We should put it in the trailer." No, no, that's right. It's important that gives away that. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Trailers are supposed to give you an impression of the movie. They're not supposed to give you the movie. And today the trailers are, if it's just a bunch of people running away from a fireball, I mean, how many times can you do that? And there's a lot of trailers where you come out and you really feel, well, I sort of wanted to see this movie until I saw this trailer, and now I don't want to see it anymore.
it's terrible.
Less
It,
is
it
less is more.
deflates them, all of them. Joe, what's the toughest darling you've had to kill in editing a movie, in cutting a movie down to size? Was there ever any one particular scene where you felt it could have greatly changed the impact of a movie that
Uh,
you're like, you gotta cut this
no,
down?
I don't think I've ever ruined a movie by changing the impact by cutting stuff. But there have been things, grace notes and things that you have put in a movie that you think would be nice, but then you watch the movie. Well, the first time you watch a rough cut is horrible. sweat bullets because there's so many things that don't work, and usually they're in the first 20 minutes of the movie. Um, and so you have to be pretty brutal about that. The nice thing about DVDs when they came out was that you were able to say, well, at least I can put this in the extras on the DVD and people will see it. Because before that, it just whatever you cut just disappeared, and it was like, oh, there's all these movies like Freaks and Mark of the Vampire, movies that have been completely recut by the studio, and then the stuff has been thrown away, and so we'll never see what it is. But now you have the ability to save that stuff and put it on as an extra, and that's supposedly a selling point, which is great. But I've cut things that I think the movie that I've cut the most stuff out of that I thought should stay in was the Second Civil War, but that was because HBO had a specific running time that they had to hit. And so there was a whole subplot about Muslims uh, and genital mutilation, which I guess they probably didn't enjoy that idea either. But it was pretty funny. Anyway, but I'm gonna have to go because this is now 1:22.
Well, then I will thank you very much for your time and let you know again how much I appreciate just sharing this past
So
hour with you,
what are
Joe.
you gonna do with this?
I don't know. I want to be pithy and say I'll sell it to the highest bidder, but next Tuesday I'm going to take it in for a job. I have a job interview at my work. I work for MeTV, the TV station.
Oh, I watch MeTV all the time.
No kidding. If you ever
And
go on
I'm
the
proud to
website,
say they don't put the credits at a box.
they don't. They do cut down the episodes sometimes so that they can fit the credits.
Well,
Of,
they
it's
do, and sometime when I watch Matlock, they've stretched it out to make it wider, which is Perry Mason they blow up, so they cut the top and the bottom off, which is fine. But when I watch Matlock, everybody's fatter than they should be, and I don't know if that's the way they get the material or if they do it there. But even the cartoons, if I watch the cartoons in the morning with the fish, they're the ratio is pretty good. But when I watch it on Saturday, they're all blown up. Even the months from the 30s are all blown up to widescreen, and the tops and the bottoms are cut off. I don't know why.
I'll bring it up at the meeting. I've written a couple 4 episodes of that show with the fish. It's my
Oh,
first
really?
IMDb credit. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, no, no, no. I love that show. And the other thing that pisses me off while I've got you is they have these CinemaScope cartoons, and they run the credits in CinemaScope with the black box with the bars, and then when the cartoon comes on, it's pan and scan. And there's no reason in the world why they can't simply run the cartoon with black box on the top and bottom and run it in CinemaScope. I mean, there's no reason. And in fact, they've just put out a DVD or a Blu-ray of CinemaScope MGM cartoons that are in the correct ratio, and with the black bars and whatever. And so they exist, but for whatever reason, MeTV doesn't run them.
The company line is blame the studio. They always tell me that it's that's how we got it from MGM. So I'm gonna really try to hold their feet to the fire about that
Well,
next meeting.
I talked to Jerry Beck about this because he's a cartoon freak who's a friend of mine, and he turned me on to the other Me TV channel, which is not the one that you get on the cable, but the one that you're supposed to get over the air. But that's mostly like Space Ghost and Scooby Doo and stuff that I don't give a shit about.
MeTV
But
Tunes, yes.
yeah, but that's less interesting to me. Johnny Quest and stuff. I mean, it's like I've seen that already. I'm more interested in the old stuff. But anyway, I think you're doing a great job at MeTV. Tell them
Thanks,
they
Joe.
have a satisfied viewer.
I'll let them know. And yeah, I'm trying. I got like an internal interview. I'm trying to work closer with Sven Guli's team. They got like a new website, so I'll add this interview to my resume. That'll be the
Okay,
headline
cool.
there. And then I've been writing for Rue Morgue a little bit, so I might try to see if they have any interest in running our conversation. They might go, "No, dude, you stunk. You blew your shot to talk to Joe Dante. You flubbed it. We don't want it." In which case, I'll see, but I'll let you know wherever it
Okay,
ends up.
stay in touch. I got to answer the door.
I appreciate you, Joe. Thank you for your time.
Okay, bye.
So long.